Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being in attendance. Again, for those of you who may just have joined, my name is Shareem Herndon Brown. I am one of the two co-authors of the Black Families Guide to College Admissions, and we kind of gathered, or assembled, I should say, some awesome guests today to talk about something that's very near and dear to both of us. The importance of addressing mental health in the college admissions process. So, for those of you who have been following myself and Tim for a while, you're aware that we wrote a second edition of our book, The Black Family's Guide to College Admission. And we were fortunate enough, or have been fortunate enough, to network with some awesome professionals that we want to make sure you can hear from them more than you can just hear from us. But very, very, very quickly, thank you for being here. Our attendees, our panelists. As we are going through this, please throw questions into the Q&A box. Tim and I will be looking at them. Well, Tim will be moderating for the most part, so I'll be looking at them, and we'll get to them at the end. I'm hoping a lot of your questions will be answered in the, as we're discussing this, but we will make sure that we answer them towards the end. And again, I always want to start with what's most important to me. And again, Tim, if you could just wave real quick, I know you're going to talk in a second. But when Tim and I came to write this book in summer 2020, we had no idea how important it was. It was something that was born out of a sheer purpose for me and a passion for him to talk about college admissions from a different standpoint, a different view, I guess, perspective than historically shared, at least in this canon. So this book is really important to us. But for those of you who know that, it's in its second edition for a reason. Last March, while we were on our book tour, we approached our editor about a few things. One was about the impending Supreme Court decision on affirmative action on race-conscious admission. We knew that was coming up in July, so this was March 2023. And we knew this was coming up. We were like, okay, how can we make sure we address it? Because it's kind of timely with our book. The second piece was more, go a little bit deeper into the essay writing process. Again, if you follow us, you know that I am a big proponent of the importance. I advocate for students to write essays that are authentic, and I knew that needed to be a little bit more robust. We wrote another chapter on essays. We wrote a chapter on the Supreme Court decision. Those were the additions. But honestly, and again, Tim is here, so I know he's hearing this, but I say this all over the country. We were being asked questions about how mental health affects students, parents, colleges. Like, there's so many components to a student's mental health in this college admissions process. We were hearing these questions, and Tim, psychology major from Morehouse, picked up on that and said, we need to add an additional chapter to our second edition about mental health. We're going to do something on the Supreme Court decision. Shareem, you're going to take the lead on this essay piece because this is kind of your wheelhouse, but I want to take the lead on the mental health piece. And I always saw it, but I'm going to give Tim his flowers, I guess, very publicly, of this is the best chapter in the book. I'll never say it again in front of you, so you heard it once, and it's being recorded. But it's a necessary chapter. We've talked about it a lot. Tim makes some very, very strong assertions, but we're grateful that Dr. Bianca Busch and Allison Slater Tate have joined us to take it even further. So without any further ado, I want to welcome you again. Thank you to our panelists. Tim, I gave you your flowers, so now you can take it away.
I thank you. I thank you for that. It's always good to hear the kind words, but the chapter would not be what it was without Dr. Bianca Busch, who consulted on that. And it was a very big part of, kind of writing that chapter and providing some professional guidance, given, kind of her pedigree and her education. But, we're really here today to talk about kind of what's going on in, college admissions surrounding mental health, not only for, students and families who are about to prepare for this process, given that, college admission is very cyclical in nature. So yes, seniors are graduating, about to go on to college, but there are juniors who are about to rise and go through the process again. And every year something different happens, but, applications continue to mount. Anxiety continues to build up. Stress continues to seep in. And we're looking for a way how to, pull as much out of that as we can in this process. And so we wanted to have this conversation during Mental Health Awareness Month because we wanted to shine a light on the importance of this topic. And so I'm so excited. We have two great panelists, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and share their stories, as they can do it better than we can, about how they, one, arrived at their professional spaces, but also why this topic is so important to them. And so I'll start with Allison Slater Tate.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Two of my favorite people to talk to about the process. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Allison Slater Tate. I am a director of college counseling at a small independent school in Florida. I'm also an independent college consultant, and I'm also a professional writer. So I do have several jobs. I also have many kids of my own. I have 4 children, ranging in age from almost 22 to just turned 12. I think the 12-year-old might actually be the one who does me in. But so I have 2 kids in college of my own. I have a current high school junior, and then I have a 6th grader. And wow, 6th grade is rough, y'all. But I started out, I grew up where I am now living and raising my children in Central Florida. I went to Princeton University as an English major, an American Studies major. I worked in TV and film for a while. And then when I decided that I was ready to raise my kids and kind of exit Hollywood, I went back to school for clinical psychology. And at the same time, I started working for Kaplan, doing test prep. And that led into advising students on applications and schoolwork and curriculum and academics. And then eventually, while I was having babies, I started writing professionally. And I worked for the Today Show for 7 years. And I was reporting for the Today Show and for the Washington Post, and it's like grown and flown on college admissions, parenting, teenagers, and mental health. And so I started to really take mental health as one of my main focuses when the pandemic happened. And it happened at the same time that my oldest child was a senior in high school. And at that point, I was working in a large public school, and I was noticing, even before the pandemic, I had no idea until I worked in a high school how incredibly bad the state of mental health was for our teenagers. And then through the pandemic and after the pandemic, it has been very striking to me how devastating mental health has been on both college campuses and in high schools. So I've kind of taken it on as a personal cause to talk to parents about mental health and to make mental health a big focus of the college admissions process, because there's no other choice. Like, the kids need us and we have to do better. So that is how I came to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Bianca Busch, if you could, share a little bit about ourselves and, how you arrived at this space.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Bianca Busch. I'm an adult, child, and adolescent psychiatrist. So I see patients for both medication and therapy. I'm licensed in 11 states. I'll say, put them in the chat. It's easier to put it that way and have California pending. And so I have a practice where we focus on serving college students, hence the multiple licenses, so we can maintain continuity of care when students go away to college. We find that to be useful. So I love what I do. A bit about me and my background. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I went to college at the University of Chicago. And so I was coming from a public school in Albuquerque to the University of Chicago, which was a big adjustment. And I had a really tough time. I did graduate with a Bachelor of Arts in Human Development, but my grades were really poor. And I had always known that I wanted to go to medical school. So I took 7 years between undergrad and medical school, retaking classes, working, sort of increasing my GPA. And so I had a nonlinear path, but it was all instructive, continues to be instructive in the work that I do. Went to medical school in Colorado, residency back at the University of Chicago, and then fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry at Boston Children's Hospital. So it's been a long path. And so I try to be encouraging when I work with students and families. Parents can get very concerned when students talk about taking a gap year, talk about taking time off, but I can tell you, When I finished at University of Chicago, I was not feeling confident. My GPA was so low. In fact, a lot of advisors said, you should just do public health. I don't think you'll ever get into medical school. And so, I had to take time, build that confidence back up, and really get back out there. So I do this work because I had ADHD and I never knew. I wasn't diagnosed until medical school. That's a long time to go without knowing that you have ADHD. I probably could have had a different outcome. Granted, I don't regret any part of the process, but some things could have been so much easier had I known. And so that's why I like to do the work that I do. I went to student counseling and they said, oh, you probably are just like anxious or depressed. Here's some medicine. But what I really needed was neuropsych testing. And I needed to know sort of about my cognitive abilities. Hello, I had to be smart because I had gotten there. But there were some needs that I had that I probably could have gotten accommodations for and medication and all that kind of thing. So I am here to be that for college students, to think holistically, to think about learning differences in addition to mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, and then to be that advocate, either with schools or with parents, and helping students really understand how they can learn best. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story.
That's a lot of it and great a bit. And thank you both for sharing, for being transparent. Again, I think that as we approach the very important conversation about mental health, that we all share our vulnerabilities and transparency, because again, that's what the kids need. And if when kids see that adults are willing to take it there, hopefully they will too. So let me start right off the top. A big overview question, and Bianca, we'll start with you. Allison, you'll give you a little time to warm up. What are some of the ways we collectively can minimize anxiety and stress in the college admissions process for students and families as they begin to think about the process? So we're, junior year, sophomore year of high school. What can we do to kind of minimize the stress around this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Students are really sometimes even starting to think about it freshman year, sophomore year, sometimes even in middle school. They're like, oh my gosh, if I don't get an A on this, then I'm not going to get to this high school. And then I'm not going to be able to take this class, So it can really start very early, even before the application process. And so I think really reassuring students that there are a lot of paths to success. And it doesn't have to look one way, right? You don't have to get all A's in everything, get all fives on your APs, all of these things that they think, okay, I have to do this. So really letting them know that you can be successful in a number of ways. As they're in the application process, I always encourage families to praise even the small accomplishments, right? You got in your applications on time for this school, or you went and visited this campus and you realize, hey, it's not for you. I would call that an accomplishment because you've learned something about yourself and where you want to be. Another thing I recommend is not comparing. And this is really, I emphasize this to the parents because students hear everything. And so if you're like, oh, so-and-so's kid is doing this or got in here or they got in, anything like that, your child hears. And while you may not feel like you're directly comparing them, they're going to internalize it as a comparison, and that can really mess with their self-esteem. And so then the last thing that I'll say is that this topic can dominate the conversation. Pick up from school, drop off from school, the dinner table, practice. It can be all consuming where families are talking about where they are in the application process, where they've gotten in, or, all this stuff, what scholarships they've gotten and not gotten. So what I encourage, because that increases anxiety when it's always what you're always talking about. So one thing I encourage for families is you got to find something else to talk about. Take a break. Maybe you have a designated time where you're talking about the application process. But outside of that, find a show that you all like to watch so you can then have some inside jokes. Play a sport together so that you have some other things to do where you're not just talking about the college application process. And I will say this about various things that families have anxieties about, and then it tends to dominate the conversation. So find something else that you guys can engage in as a family that's not about the college application process.
Thank you so much. So much. Allison, would like to add to that, please?
Yeah, just to confirm what she said, I call it the C word senior year because I try to, I've been through it twice with my own children, and I know how very much we don't get a lot of time with our children when they're seniors in high school. They're very busy. They're doing so many things. And there is a tendency every time you see them to want to be like, hey, have you? And immediately the kids are like shut down because they don't want to talk about it. They are hearing about college at school. They're hearing about college on social media. They're being bombarded with messages about college. Trust me, I tell my parents, they did not forget that they're applying to college. You don't need to remind them. And they'll start avoiding you. And you don't want that. Like, you don't want this to be their main memory of you senior year. The last year you have them at home, the last year they get to be your kid. Want that. So just to confirm what she said, that is absolutely, I like to tell parents, pick a time when you are allowed to ask them questions about college. It can be like an hour or two on a Sunday night, and then you stick to the plan. You do not bring it up any other time unless it's like a logistics, like, is this an okay time to go visit this school? Because if they know that they're safe being around you and you're not going to bring it up, they can bring it up. They can ask you things, but as long as they know that they're safe around you, it really does take the tension down a lot senior year. The other things that I would say are that in a practical sense, visiting colleges really helps, and it helps you and it helps your kid. And that's an expensive investment and it takes a lot of time. So I realize that not everybody can do that and do it for every school that their child is going to end up applying to or anything like that. But I just want to say, any school that you visit, whether it's going to end up on the list or not, whether it is a place that they want to see, it teaches a kid about college, like what college is, because it's this big idea, this hazy idea in their heads. They don't know what it is. They're not really sure what it's going to look like. They mostly have a TikTok video set to a catchy song to think about it, and it's very romanticized. It's really good for them to see it, but it's also really good for parents to see the realities of colleges, because I think the more colleges you see, especially if you prioritize likelier schools, I think that it really reassures you that your kid could kind of go anywhere and be okay. And that is part of doing the work on ourselves that we need to do so that we are modeling that for our children. And the more I see, and obviously it's my job, I go look at a lot of colleges. I've been to visit colleges that probably nobody's ever heard of before. And I fall in love with every college. I'm a little bit of an easy audience because I love college, but I fall in love with these colleges. I look at their strengths and the great programs they have. And I think, what a great place to go to school. It makes me feel so much better. I think I've told you guys before, I am my easiest client because I know my kids are going to be okay no matter where they go. Like, I literally do not stress because they're going to be fine. And I know that because there's so many great places to go. The only other thing I would want to add is, I don't want it to sound like a cliche, but you have to love the kid you have. And I know you do as a parent. Like, we love our kids and we know that, but to them, especially senior year, it starts to feel like maybe you expect them that they aren't, or some idealized version of them, and maybe some version of them that is able to get into XYZ school. And you have to do that work on yourself to say, I love my kid. I love my kid for who he is. I love my kid for her own self and her own heart. And I'm not looking for a college that's going to transform them. I'm looking for the college where they can transform into the person that they are supposed to be and that will support them in that. So you are not looking to make them into an applicant. We're not raising applicants. We're raising humans and we're building lives. And that's might sound a little cliche, but honestly, like, that's what it all comes back to, is these are your children and we have to love who they are.
Thank you. And just before we transition to the next question, we talked about the parents, we talked about the students, and kind of making that time and not placing so much emphasis on this. But what about other family members? Like, it could be one thing for the parents and the students not to talk about it, but you have Uncle Joe that says, "Hey, where are you going to college?" And you have Aunt Elizabeth like, "Hey, have you made a decision yet?" How does that play into this process as well? If he were the one, you could address that very quickly.
I don't know how Dr. Busch addresses it in her practice. I will say that is absolutely a danger. And you are also your child's protector. And when you are going to have a family holiday, it is absolutely okay to say, to send out a message ahead of time and say, hey, we're not going to talk about this weekend. Like, this weekend, They're just the same kid that's been at every other holiday, and you're going to ask them about literally anything else because this is not the most interesting thing about them right now, even if you think it is. And please, please support us in this. And if you see it happening, I think that your kids really notice if you step in and say, hey, like, has he told you about the movie we saw last weekend? Has he told you about the game we went to last weekend? You are their defender. And I think that it's okay if the kids are going to face that kind of stuff from other people and from outside forces, and that's going to happen. It's okay also to role play with them a little bit and just say, like, let's come up with your comeback line. Like, what's going to be your comeback line? And you know, I think that it's important to acknowledge it. It's important to acknowledge that it's not okay. And that it's kind of dumb, but that is a natural reflex for people. Just like they want to ask you what you're going to name your baby or when are you going to get pregnant, or I mean, people say dumb things when they are filling space and when they think that it's small talk. So, and you know, that's part of life, but you can help your kids.
Yeah, I love that. And I also do role play with a lot of the students that I work with. Okay, we have a vacation coming, holiday coming up. What are we going to say? Because it will continue, Allison, just like you said. There's going to be, what's your major going to be? What are you going to do for your summer internship? What are you going to do after college, right? Like it just continues and continues and continues. And so, yeah, I like the idea of role play, and I like the idea of protecting the space for your kids. I love that.
And so for the students who are about to graduate in the next couple of weeks, they have completed the first chapter of their life and completed high school. They, you know, are making decisions about college. You know, this year has been unprecedented as far as kind of college decision making, and there's some still making decisions because of the FAFSA. And you know, this is kind of a two-part question, and you know, we'll begin with you, Dr. Busch. You know, how can we support, you know, parents who for the first time are maybe letting their children go, but also support students who are also, you know, kind of leaving and, you know, going to create their own path? How can we support them as they go about, you know, kind of thinking about what is the next chapter that they have?
Yeah, this is important because both parties are going through their own developmental stage, right? The young adults or the adolescents are moving into their young adult life. And then the parents, I mean, they may still have some children at home, but they're also moving into a different space, right? Like they're letting go or dealing with, grappling with letting go of the young adult and not being able to see them all of the time, ask them questions. So it's a stage for them. It can be sad, it can be scary, they can be worried. So there's a lot of holding that needs to take place with both. And so things that I recommend doing, of course, is spending some good quality time together during the summer before your student goes off. And then actually a lot of really practical things I think can be helpful, because what you're wanting to do is sort of launch this young person. Some young people have difficulty with this, but we are, as parents, and I say this with my 3-year-old, like imagining in the future, and then also the work that I do with the parents that I work with, but we're preparing them to be adults. So some really practical things like teaching them how to cook a small meal, how to do their laundry. You know, you'd be surprised, but sometimes I work with students on how to get snacks. Like they're like, I'm hungry all the time. And so I have to work with them. I'm like, okay, well, this is where you go to get snacks. Like what kind of snacks can you have in your room? And so some of these things you could work on through the summer, and it's going to help their transition. And it probably will also help you feel better as a parent, knowing, okay, I've equipped them for this. Another thing that I would say, you should have a conversation with your young person if they have had mental health difficulties in high school. I was an RA in the dorms. It would be terribly challenging when we would have a student who would be struggling and we had no idea they had a history. Now with HIPAA, like we can't know their entire medical history, but if they know their medical history, they can at least tell us that and be a little bit more open and communicate. Because that's a very hard thing as you know, dorm people working in the dorms, but then also at the student health center, right? Because since they're over 18, they have to give permission to the student counseling center to talk to their parents. So those mental health things that are going on in high school, they don't go away. And it's really wishful thinking that they're going to get to college, everything's going to be fine because they're going to be in a new setting and have new friends. And in fact, a lot of the times they can get worse. So if you don't hear anything else about like how to prepare, I would say make sure your young person knows sort of what they are dealing with, and then you can even go with them during orientation week or parent drop off This is where the student counseling center is. This is where the health center is. This is where you can get tutoring if you're having a hard time. So put on my soapbox, but I think that could be really helpful.
No, we appreciate your soapbox. So don't let anybody tell you different. You're here to share information. You're sharing good information. So now I guess it's a great segue into like the challenges of having a young adult and them wanting to seek additional support. What is shared with the parents? Again, it gets complicated and uncomfortable because you want to support your kid. You know that they have some mental health challenges. They're just living life. They're growing up and they need some support. Bottom line is you're not allowed to be privy to a lot of that information. So I want to ask both of you a question, Allison. I'll start with you this time. Let's talk about seeking support, right? And the best ways for students to do that. So we want our students to take the initiative on their own volition to seek support. If parents need to set the table, so be it. But what are the practical steps for students to seek support?
So I think that continuity of care element that Dr. Busch mentioned is incredibly important. If your student has been seeking support with your help at home before they leave for college, you can't just drop them off at a college campus without a plan. They need a plan. And one of the things that my own child really surprised me by doing on his own, which I wish I had thought of and I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. And maybe I can take credit for, I don't know, him being able to do it. But when he first got to his campus in January of 2021, he immediately made an appointment with the mental health services. And he told me about it afterwards and said, hey, I made an appointment because I wanted to have a baseline and I wanted to know how to seek help if I needed to. And that made me feel so much better because I knew he knew how to do it. And I knew, like, I actually thanked him. I said, thank you for making me feel like I don't have to worry quite as much about you being isolated and in a northern state in the snow by yourself in a room online because of COVID. Because I felt like he really showed me that he knew how to seek help and seek support, and he knew how to lay that groundwork. If your student, and I mean, there had been stuff during his senior year that obviously led up to that point. If your student is not thinking that way, I think that, like Dr. Busch said, you normalize it so much when you go to visit campus or when you move them in. If you're looking for the dining hall, you're also looking for the mental health center. Like if you're looking for the mailboxes and where they're picking up packages, you're also looking for tutoring centers. Like you have to normalize it. All of that stuff is normal. And honestly, kind of expected for freshmen. Freshmen have adjustments. Freshman year is hard. So I think that if you make that seem like a normal thing and that's something that you would want them to have, I think that's number one. I also think that as parents, we have to model that kind of care for ourselves. There have been reports that have come out past few years, like from Making Caring Common at Harvard and the Graduate School of Education, that says our kids are not okay because also their parents are not okay. And we're not. Like that's one thing that I've seen by being a counselor in a school is that a lot of my students' parents have a lot of issues as well. And if you normalize seeking care, seeking your own therapy, seeking medication if you need it, and you don't hide it and you don't make it something that's shameful, then I think that they see that too. With my own children, when they went off to college, obviously I was worried about both of them, one of them in the middle of COVID, the other one quickly behind him in the fall of 2022. You know, I think that one of the hardest parts of parenting is letting go. Like it is incredibly hard. But that's okay. We can do hard things. And if we expect our kids to do hard things, we have to do those hard things. And that means that we have to give over a little bit of control to these children and say, I trust you to take care of yourself, but I'm also here if you need me. I had an interview with a professional once for a story I did for the Today Show. And she said, look, if there is one thing that they need you to take off their plate, like ordering the medication for them or making sure it gets shipped to them or setting up an appointment for them. If there's one thing that they need and you know that this one thing will be a critical element, don't be afraid to do it. You're not infantilizing them. You're not coddling them too much, because I think that we have had kind of a reflex thing like, ooh, we got to let them be adults and got to let them fly. And we do. But if there's one thing that you know is going to be an issue or a hurdle, and you say, hey, do you want me to do that for you? And they say, yes, please, thank you. Don't feel guilty about doing that one thing. Because right now they're going to, like that freshman year, they go through so many transitions, so many, that if you can take one thing off of them, okay, that's okay. They will get there. They'll do it. Like we used to tell people when they were potty training, your kid's not going to college in a diaper, which I am happy to say my kids have not, even though I was really sure that I would be the first one with kids going to college in diapers. Happy to say it did not happen that I know of. And that's lovely if I don't know about. But I do think that it's another thing to say at some point, like I do make sure that my kids' prescriptions get called in. It's okay. They will call in their own prescription someday. But for right now, I can do this. This is okay. And it's with their permission and with their request. So I think that that's important for you to be able to do that work on yourself. I don't ask them where they are. I don't track them. I don't make them check in with me at any point of the day. I don't check their grades. The big one. For my own mental health, I don't check their
You're
grades.
better. You're better than me. I got location. I got everything.
No, because you know what? I'm so thankful that when I was 18 years old, my parents let me live in New York City and work for David Letterman. Like I had lived in a suburban town my whole life. I did not know anything about living in New York City. And my parents were like, okay, it's really scary, but we're going to let you do it. Thank goodness they did. Like, thank goodness they did. So I look at that and I say, I can do that. Like, I can do it. I do ask them for, I will text my kids and say, proof of life, please. And they usually do it in a normal amount of time, most of the time. And they know if I get that, that we're good. So I do think that's the other thing is that this is hard and it's hard for us too. And we have to acknowledge that. And we also have to do it.
Dr. Busch, want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, you really hit on a lot of the things that I was going to say about tracking grades, right? We have FERPA, which is the federal law that your student has to give you permission to look at their grades, and that might be something you need to negotiate, right? Like it really is family dependent, right? I think it is great for parents' mental health and their relationship with their children to not be checking all the time, unless there is, it's a way that you're going to be able to discern that there's trouble and even sometimes mental health trouble. So there are occasions where I say, okay, maybe let's share for a short period while we're testing things out, right? So, but in general, I think all of those things are fantastic. Calling prescriptions, yeah, it's hard to navigate prescriptions as like a grown-up adult sometimes. So, if you will. So I think all of those things are fantastic. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted. No, I think you got everything that I didn't get. Yeah. Yeah.
So before we open up for Q&A, there was something that, we have touched upon in our initial meeting and then even today that I did want, get both of your perspectives on, and that's testing. So, a lot of parents are, should I take the SAT? Should I take the ACT? Their AP testing is going on right now, Allison. I didn't know if you knew. It's going on right now. And then, obviously, there's, other things that go into this process. So can you just share how families should approach testing and what are some ways to support students in that to where that pressure doesn't add on to this already complex situation? Dr. Busch?
Yeah, great question. So, the way that I think about it is there's the information that you are getting to take the test, right? There's the content, but then there's also sort of the emotions around the test. And so, Allison, when we were preparing for this call, you were telling me about so many of your students just having so much anxiety around these tests, different standardized exams. And so I think that there's a lot that we can teach our children about how to approach these tests, but they may need some help at a certain point, right? They may need help from a professional to manage the anxieties that they have about the test. Because most of the time, students really are comprehending the material, right? Like they're going to be doing some type of prep program, a Kaplan or a this or that, right? But the reason why they're not performing to their top capacity may be because of anxiety, perhaps of a learning difference, maybe not, but so I would say that that is something to keep in mind. Is your child able to focus and concentrate on the exam, or is anxiety getting in the way? And it can be hard for parents to answer that, but it's a good question that you might ask the counselors at school, or if they have an existing therapist, you might ask their existing therapist. But I have seen really, I mean, incredible change when someone's anxiety is treated in their test score. They knew the material the entire time, but the anxiety was getting in the way. And then once that anxiety is treated, their test scores really go through the roof.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, they're alluding to the fact that I am an AP coordinator and I am in the middle of AP exam testing right now. And I was telling Dr. Busch and the guys the other day that I lose sleep during AP exam weeks. And what I lose sleep over is the fact that I am worried I'm going to have to call an ambulance for a student. And it's happened in the past. And believe it or not, today it happened again. So we did have a student have a panic attack, and one of my proctors had to go to the hospital with a student in an ambulance. And so I think that one of the big things is that you have to realize that the test anxiety is very real. The impact on the children is very real. And I was telling them that I have kids walk into the testing room saying, oh, I woke up in the middle of the night and threw up. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do this. Like, our kids are not taking care of themselves because they are so convinced that these test scores are so important. And I think that it's part of the overall culture of lowering the stakes. I mean, these kids believe that one bad grade, one bad test grade, not nailing their AP exam scores is going to change the trajectory of their lives. And that is just not how life works. And, you know, as Dr. Busch talked about her nonlinear path, like, life is not linear. And I think that we forget to tell them that. Like, I tell them all the time, I said, I know that your parents did not just, you know, decide they were going to be doctors, go to med school, like straight path, never had a doubt, like never had a blip on their screen. You cannot tell me that. I don't believe it. And I think that we just forget because our kids kind of see where we are at 49 and not where we were at 23. And they don't realize that we sat around wondering what we were doing with ourselves, or that we stayed up all night and failed a test, or that we you know, worried about our own SAT scores. And we're fine because that's part of life and having lived life. And when you think about this generation, a large chunk of has been COVID, and a large chunk of their lives has been the aftermath, and a large chunk of their lives has been uncertainty. It's really hard to know that things are going to be okay when everybody keeps using the adjective unprecedented, like every 5 minutes. I'm so sick of living in an unprecedented world. And they really are too. And they need to hear it from us. And I think that, you know, I think all the time my kids aren't listening to me. They're not listening to me. They're not taking what I say in. Your language really matters. And, you know, my own 16-year-old who is dyslexic and has learning disabilities he took the SAT last weekend. He's taking it maybe again in June. And he had to go see his test prep tutor tonight. And I talked to the test prep tutor ahead of time and I said, look, he had a really bad experience. His computer wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. He had to use one of the school computers. He felt really bad about it. He felt like a failure. He didn't have a good day. And I said, so he really doesn't want to come tonight. And she said, you know what? I'm just going to like chill with him and talk about other things and just say, look, this isn't that big of a deal. Like, and that's what I tell him. But I find other trusted adults who tell him too, because when your mom's the college counselor, you don't always listen to her the first time or the second. But, you know, I think that one thing I see parents saying a lot, well, they'll just take it again. They'll take it again and maybe they can nail the score. And I have to remind them, first of all, statistically, after like, if you've already done test prep and you've already done those things, you've had the classes, if you don't do anything differently, then after the third or fourth time, nothing's really going to change.
No, they're banging their head up against the wall, and it's so unnecessary and unfair
It
to the
is
kid
because
that
it
we
comes
expect them
back.
to walk. Yeah.
Yes, they have to open that email. And the second they open that email and their shoulders drop and they just like their face drops, I have seen it so many times. I've had students whose parents made them take the test 11 or 12 times.
Absolutely
And
not.
say, this is abuse. Like, this is not okay. So just remember that about test scores. Yes, there are a small handful of schools that have gone back to requiring test scores. I happen to live in a state where test scores are required for our public state universities, but we have 12 state universities and they have varying levels of expectations for test scores. And I just try to remind them, like, it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay. Your test score is not you. What you do for 3 hours or 2 hours on a Saturday morning is nothing compared to who you are every day of the week. And we are going to control the things we can control. We're going to give it our best shot. And then we're going to move on with our lives because
Well,
this
it's
should.
funny you said that, Allison. Something you said earlier, so I don't mean to interrupt, but building humans, right? We're not raising applicants. We're
Yes.
building humans. And Dr. Busch, I know you wanted to circle back because I think it's important that you mention what you were going to say about there are other ways to get support
Yes.
for students outside of just the college campus.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention this briefly. I know we have some questions to answer, but we talked about going to the student counseling office on campus. Yes, that is a great resource. I also will highlight that often they have groups that are just fun, like video game groups and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, so scary, mental health thing. You can have fun. Now, if you cannot find help there are often lists for people to go see in the community, and you may need to do that. Oftentimes, student counseling centers can only see students for like 6 to 8 sessions. Oftentimes students need more than that. Sometimes student counseling centers will not prescribe stimulant medications. So you may need to go to another place for that. So some great resources are Thriving Campus. If your campus participates, it's a listing of community providers. Psychology Today, which is a huge database, can be a bit overwhelming, but that's there. Zen Care, Therapy for Black Girls, and InnoPsych. So I just wanted to throw those out there. And then if you're just wanting to get some information in general about mental health, the JED Foundation and the Steve Fund are great just for educating yourself about various mental health topics. And that's great for parents and it's great for students. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned all of those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we transition very, very quickly, Allison, one of the questions are there tools to help students reduce anxiety the day of the test?
I think Dr. Busch has some practical things probably that she could add. What I enforce with my kids is make sure they've slept. I mean, it's just like having a baby. You want to make sure they slept. You want to make sure they eat. You want to make sure that they take care of themselves leading up to the test. I think that it's really important for you to say, like, this is not going to make or break where you go to college. Like, you're going to college. The kids tell me all the time, okay, but but I don't think I'm going to get into college. Yes, you are. You're going to get into college. It's easy to get into college. It's hard to get into a few colleges. Very small amount overall. And there are so many choices. But I think that lowering the stakes of this test is very, very important, however you can do it. Maybe you don't talk about the test leading up to the test. Another thing that I used personally is I had my own like hype up song, and I encouraged the kids to pick a hype up song that they can play in the car before they get out of the car and go do their thing. And then don't talk about it afterwards. Like, it shouldn't be a big part of their day. When my kid had a bad experience, he came in and he was not great, and we didn't talk about it again. So this is talking about it. But Dr. Busch might have some other techniques.
Yeah, I will say, there's box breathing, there's progressive muscle relaxation, there are grounding techniques. I have some on my YouTube channel. I'm just going to put the link for the grounding techniques in. Oh, and let me put it to everyone. So you can go there. And then if you follow me on Instagram and TikTok, actually, I have some techniques on both of those places. So you can do them in the moment. You can do them before the exam, during the exam, to sort of recenter yourself, bring some calm, bring some focus.
And so I know Dr. Busch, in a previous conversation, we addressed this, but I would love if you could address this with this group, is how do we normalize students seeking help, as some parents and some communities still have stigmas related to seeking out mental health support?
That's a really good question, because not everyone's parents really buy into mental health. They may even call it mental health. So this is actually where student counseling centers are really great. And HIPAA is really great because you can create that separation from your parents. So I would say, student counseling centers is a place where you can find a home. talking amongst your peers. Again, those two websites that I recommended, the Steve Fund and the JED Foundation, are great places to inform yourself, to learn about what these different things are. NAMI is also a great website, National Alliance on Mental Illness, to learn information. So you might end up educating yourself. But the wonderful thing about the young people that we have now, they're talking about it. They're like, oh yeah, my therapist said da 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 da, or I think you have this, or you might want to check on this. So that's kind of the cool thing that's happening now, is that they're talking to each other. And once you're over 18, you don't have to share this information with your parents, and student counseling centers honor that. And so they really do honor that. And so you can go there, get support, and know that you don't have to involve your parents.
And just
I
very
just want
quickly,
to say, just to add on to that, if people are here, they probably do believe in mental health support. If they came to this webinar, or if they're listening to this webinar, but a lot of us have young people in our lives who are not our own young people. And I've had a lot of students reach out to me after they graduated and they're on college campuses, and they say, I'm not okay. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And they don't mean that campus. And they say, like, my parents don't believe in mental health. My parents don't believe in that. They don't believe in therapy. So just, if you are here and you're listening to this, like, all of those resources are great ways for you to be their ally, and also for you to suggest places that they can seek support. I've said, like, how can I help you set up, like, going to a church? Because I know that church is a big part of their lives. Like, if you don't have a church on campus that you trust, or that you feel like you're part of the community, a lot of times it's very reassuring for kids, or a temple or a synagogue or whatever it is. Places of faith can be very reassuring to kids. For others, like things like helping them figure out where the LGBTQ support center on campus is, or like, who are those advisors? Like, there are young people who need adults in their lives who are not their parents. And once they're 18, like, go for it and give them resources.
and so a couple of times we mentioned HIPAA, but could we just kind of share what that is for the audience who may not know?
Oh, sure. Now you're going to ask me to say all the letters in the acronym, and I can't remember.
Or you can just share what it is. Just
So
so
HIPAA is basically the law, the rule that says that your health information cannot be shared without your written permission. And so anytime you go to a doctor's office, you're going to be signing a form saying that you acknowledge that, and they're going to say how they're going to use your health information. So when you get to college and you're going to the student health center, you're going to the student counseling center, they are all observe HIPAA, right? It's a federal law. And so your mom can't just call and say, hey, I know my student, my child went there. What did you guys talk about? Like, what is the diagnosis? We cannot do that. We cannot release that information unless the student signs something, a release of information saying it's okay for a parent or whoever it might be. It could even be a friend. For us to release that information to the friend. So that is the HIPAA law. It covers your privacy in all healthcare settings.
And just for humor me, I looked it up. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA.
Yes.
HIPPA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and everything that Dr. Busch said it is in terms of, I guess, a parent and a student not having access to the student's information once they turn 18.
And the last question, go ahead.
Wait, before you move on, just because I think it's really important, can you ask Dr. Busch to explain if a parent feels that their child is in crisis and needs what they should do?
Yes, that's a great question. Because here's the thing, you as a parent can communicate your concerns. You won't be able to get information about your young person, but you can call the resident head, resident assistant, dean of student life. You can say, hey, I'm very concerned about my young person. Whatever your concern is, and they'll be able to check on them. You as a parent can absolutely share information, and we may just say, okay, and we will do that information what we need to make sure your young person is safe. But yes, absolutely.
And so the last question before we wrap up, and we definitely thank you for the time and kind of the expertise that y'all provided, is what is a safe way to discuss college with your student without overwhelming them?
Well, I think that, our advice at the top of the show is very, very important. Limit it. Limit it. Don't make it the entire theme of senior year. Make sure you're letting them have those milestones, homecoming and prom and silly Friday nights and senior traditions and all the things. Like, let them be with their friends. I know a lot of parents struggle with when they know that their kids haven't done certain things for college applications. They're like, maybe you should stay home and do those. No, they shouldn't. Like, they should go do their thing, because they will get those applications done that they want to have done. And I think that it's important for you to say, I can't want it more than you do. And you need to do it if you want to do it. And I'm here to support you and help you in any way possible, but I'm not going to be a nag. You need to be their parent and their safe space, and you can't be the safe place to fall if they think that you're going to be somebody else who's giving them a grade and judging them and nagging them and doing those things. You can nag them about taking the trash out. You can nag them about, have you done your homework? But with college, every single thing you say is loaded. There is nothing that you say that is benign. Everything you say comes with baggage, because you're their parent and you installed those buttons in them, and you're pushing all of them. So I think it's important for them to feel loved and worthy outside of college, and to talk about literally anything else every time you can. The other thing that I think it's really important, something I've had to learn to say to my kids, and I had to learn it because they overheard me saying it to my students. And they were like, when did you get like good at this? And great, awesome, winning at parenting, you guys. But what they heard me saying to my students would call me in panic about failing a test. What if I get this bad grade? What if I don't do this? What if I miss this deadline? And I said, it's going to be okay. It will work out. Things work out. I'm not going to tell you that everything's going to be perfect or you're going to get exactly what you want, or that this isn't something significant, but I am going to tell you, we're going to figure it out. And I've had to say that to my own child. I've gotten the panicked phone call where they say, I just failed my exam and I'm pretty sure I failed the class and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be on probation. I've gotten that phone call. And my reaction had to be deadpan, like no catastrophizing, no like, oh my God, how much money is this going to cost me? What are we going to do? What comes next? I had to say, we'll figure it out. People
No,
fail
that, that is spot on again. And one of the things that we share in common, Allison, is having children who are older and out of the house, and understanding that you're living this, right? A son at Princeton, a son at Furman. Again, those are very different schools, and I'm glad that you have been able to, again, be transparent and say, as an educator and as a parent, I'm trying to live this thing where Tim, again, I'm gonna give you your flowers, redefining success, right? Tim and I have been about that from the beginning, is that we're not going to allow the college admissions process to say that these schools are more important than these schools. There's 4,000 college universities in the country, 2,000 are for bachelor's degrees. You will find your way. So says the parent of a recent community college graduate. So we want to say thank you, participants, for being here. Panelists, you know how I feel about you. I want to make sure that people know where to find you. It's important to us that you guys are a resource for many. So Allison, it's Allison S. Tate. Yes, there you go, Tim. Allison, you go first, and then Bianca, you close us out with how people can find you.
Yeah, that's my Gmail address, and that's probably the easiest way to find me. You have to make sure you put the S in the middle, or else a very nice woman who does nothing in college admissions in Houston, Texas gets the email. So it's Allison State. Yeah.
And Dr. Busch?
You can find me at Dr. Busch at drbiancabusch.com, and also at College Psychiatrist on all social media channels. And then I also wanted to mention two quick things. I have a coping kit that's a mental health focused coping kit, or gift box that you can get for your young people. You want to let them know that you're thinking about their mental health. I've got you covered. It's customized, 10 items. They're super cool. So you can find that on our website, collegepsychiatrist.com. It's also on Etsy. And then just to address the testing anxiety, we actually have an 8-week program where we work explicitly on testing anxiety and lowering that down. We do an evaluation in the beginning to sort of screen for learning differences and other conditions. And your student will learn how to conquer those nerves, those jitters before the exam. We're going to do some integrative things like herbs, massage, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, very fun, very exciting. And so you can also find that on our website. It's Test with Confidence.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Tim. Thank you for rallying the troops. I'm always going to let people know that you're instrumental in getting this all together. I'm just the better looking one of us. All that said, we are grateful for everyone who's here tonight. Thank you for sharing great information. Please follow up with us. This conversation does not stop with this webinar. We're going to continue to make sure that this is top of mind for us as parents and educators as our students are involved in this college admissions process. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Tim, are we good?
We are good. Thank you, everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you,
Good night,
Allison.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Dr.
much.
Busch.
All
Take
right.
care.